Good evening, and welcome to the closing ceremony of the week of activities designed to highlight the activities, the programs undertaken under the Strengthening Disaster Management Capacity of Women in the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and Dominica, GUIDOM for short, project. Let me begin by acknowledging with us this evening Louis Thais Francisco, Head of Office for UNDP Dominica Project Office and the Project Office team, Dr. Kira Paul, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Blue and Green Economy, Agriculture and National Food Security, Mrs. Silvani Burton, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Youth Development and Empowerment, Youth at Risk, Gender Affairs, Senior Security, and Dominicans with Disabilities, Ms. Joanne Commodore, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of National Security and Home Affairs, specially inviting guests, including our implementing partners from the FAO, the Inter-American Institute of Cooperation in Agriculture, the Caribbean Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology, the University of Reading, and other stakeholders, beneficiary farmers of the South, Southeast, Central, and East region, UNDP Barbados and Eastern Caribbean multi-country office team, the members of the UNDP Dominica Project Office, members of the media, listening and viewing public in Dominica and the Dominican diaspora, and of course, our listening and viewing public in the rest of the Caribbean and overseas. Over the past week, we have seen quite a few events executed successfully to bring attention to the work that has been ongoing over the past months to support farmers and create gender balance in agriculture. Our farmers have been empowered with new techniques to increase their yield and new knowledge and skills to become more competitive and cutting edge in their practices. A number of panel discussions were held on topics relating to disaster risk reduction in farming, early warning systems, and the whole idea of mainstreaming. How do we incorporate the gains we've made into our overall farming practices in Dominica? And of course, we had voting ongoing online for our 8 champions of champion farmers. So tonight we will announce the winners of that competition. But this evening, we begin with presentations on ongoing projects at the Dominica Project Office here in Dominica, of course. And our first speaker is Mrs. Agnes Esprit. She's the National Coordinator of the Global Environment Facility Small Grants Program in Dominica, and she has served in that position from 2010. She also served as the Community Liaison Officer at the Basic Needs Trust Fund. She obtained a Master in Business Administration and a Diploma in Management. She also holds certificates in Adult Education, Project Management, Gender and Development Studies. She continues to work closely with local communities and regional, sub-regional, and national programs and projects to build capacity, empower local communities and partners to provide necessary support to achieve goals set in terms of the impact on environment, lives, and livelihoods. So at this point, we welcome Mrs. Agnes Esprit. Mrs. Esprit, good evening.
Good evening, Dion, and thank you very much for your welcome. Good evening to our invited guests, colleagues, listeners, viewers, and in particular our farmers and community groups. I'd just like to share with you give you some insight into the community program that is the Global Environment Facility Small Grants Program, GEF short. It's funded by the Environment Facility, implemented by the United Nations Development Program, and executed by the United Nations Office for Project Services. Community action, global impact. That's what we're working towards. And we're doing that as a demand-driven program that addresses the GEF criteria and the community needs and initiatives. We strive to reach the marginalized, poor, and vulnerable communities, and through grants, small up to $1,000. Again, we focus on the demands of the community. We look at the environmental situation, and what is it that community people can do together to improve the situation and empower them to have some sustainable livelihoods initiative. So we work with community groups, registered or non-registered. That includes persons with disabilities, indigenous people, youth, fisher folk, farmers, and so many others across the island. Our communities implement projects such as those listed here related to reforestation, alternative. Let's go back a bit. Reforestation, of alternative agro-processing, community water systems, solar systems, fish aggregate devices, and so on. We also focus a lot on training and capacity building for community groups. In sessions on organization development, business skills, we support them in developing business plans, marketing plans, etc. Our program operates in 4-year phases, and our operational phase 6, which ended in 2020 and actually continued into 2021. We actually had 29 projects in that phase for a total of over 167,000 US. That period, we focus on the strategic initiatives to improve conservation and sustainable use and management of terrestrial and coastal marine ecosystems. We looked at agroecology practices, and we looked at innovative community-based tools and approaches. And our programming looks at the focal areas of the GEF: biodiversity, climate change, international waters, chemicals and waste management, land degradation, and capacity development. We had some special funding to do adaptation projects from Aid as well. We are moving into operations. We're in operational phase 7 and just about approving grants for that phase. In this phase, we are looking at supporting local actions for green recovery as our theme. And we're doing that under strategic initiatives of community-based conservation of threatened ecosystems and species, sustainable agriculture, fisheries, and food security. And you can already see that there are several synergies with the other projects that will be presented, especially the Guyana project, where the focus is on agriculture, fisheries, and food security. So these are some of the areas that we will be addressing in phase 7, as well as local to global coalitions for chemicals and waste management. And we know that we have a serious problem with plastics especially. So we are also looking to do some more work with community-based groups in partnership with the relevant authorities as well, to reduce and remove use of chemicals in agriculture, promote plastic solid waste management, enhance local to global coalitions. And in doing all of this, we have to look at cross-cutting initiatives. And our focus is on ensuring that no one is left out of or kept away from getting that opportunity. So we look at gender inclusiveness, gender mainstreaming, we look at youth participation, persons with disabilities, indigenous people. So everybody is recognized as important in the first to conserve our environment and to empower them to have some sustainable livelihoods as we move forward. In doing that, we will encourage CSO government, private sector dialogues, especially where we can influence policy or inform policy, and knowledge management, documentation, with other projects and programs, also with other government and non-government institutions and organizations alike. And of course, the South-South cooperation that we can learn from each other across the seas, across the oceans, across the mountains. And then monitoring and evaluation, that too will be a very serious area or aspect of our operations in Operation Phase 7 as we continue to ensure that we can deliver on what we set out to do and have the results that will, together with the results of others, have impact that we would like to nationally, eventually globally. As our theme says, community action, global impact. If each community takes that positive action, we can have that global impact. So this is what we have to share on the Global Environment Facility, GEF Small Grants Program, SGP for short. And we will look at going forward how we can even build on partnerships and relationships with other programs and projects, including those which will be presented here this evening. So thank you very much, and we hope that you can contact us to get more information on our programming and be encouraged to submit your proposal for funding.
And we thank you, Mrs. Esprit, for your presentation and the information you have provided on the GEF Small Grants Project, the work that has been done to assist the small and the marginalized communities in advancing sustainable agricultural practices, in agro-processing, in fishing, and the sustainable practices to protect the environment. We certainly look forward to the work that will continue under this project to impact positively our communities in Dominica. At this point, we would like to introduce Ms. Nickez Macpherson. She's the project coordinator for the SSLR at the UNDP Dominica Project Office. Ms. Macpherson's professional experience spans almost 20 years in various social work and education roles, and more recently, as the project coordinator for the project Strengthening Sustainable Livelihoods and Resilience in the Kalinago Territory. She holds a BSc in social work from the University of the West Indies, and she was in 2017 awarded an MSc in Natural Resource and Environmental Management with specialization in water resources management. She has worked with the University of Montreal, where she coordinated research study on understanding how climate change affects the health of the population and whether this change has any influence on migration patterns of individuals. Ms. Macpherson, good evening and welcome.
Hi, good evening, Dion, and thanks for this excellent presentation and on me. Um, Also, good night to my fellow panelists as well as the listening public here. My name is Nickez Macpherson. I am the project coordinator for the Strengthening Sustainable Livelihoods and Resilience in the Kalinago Territory Project, for short SSLR. The SSLR is focused primarily on the Kalinago community, which is the largest indigenous grouping in the Eastern Caribbean. The project is funded by the government of India under the India UN Development Partnership, and it is implemented by the United Nations Development Program in close collaboration with various partners, which includes the Kalinago Council, the Ministry of Environment, Rural Modernization and Kalinago Upliftment, the Ministry of Blue and Green Economy, Agriculture and National Food Security, the Ministry of Tourism, international transport and maritime initiatives. The key objective of the SSLR project is to provide assistance to the Kalinago community to access equitable social protection systems, quality services, and to improve sustainable economic opportunities. Now, how do we intend to achieve this objective? It's through four main outputs. The first being through agriculture, to boost agricultural production and sustainable agricultural practices, through forestry to design and implement community reforestation programs and to protect livelihoods and to augment critical water catchment areas, all within the Kalinago territory space, through tourism to help to develop a comprehensive Kalinago tourism strategy and brand for the Kalinago community, which generates new income opportunities for that space as well as through institutional strengthening of the Kalinago Council. And that is, in essence, to help them to boost institutional capacities and to make better participative and inclusive decisions for planning for the development of the Kalinago community. Each one of our outputs has specific activities which we have started implementation as of July of this year. And under the strengthening sustainable agricultural practices, we intend to provide equipment and material in support of construction of a plant and tree propagation facility within Kalinago territory. And we also intend to provide technical expertise towards product development and marketing of the cassava crop, root crop, as well as to provide specific small grants to Kalinago farmers to help to improve their product development, as well as in the marketing of cassava byproducts. Additionally, for output two, which speaks to the community livelihood and reforestation of water catchment areas, what we intend to do is to update our reforestation strategy for the Kalinago territory and also offer a livelihood program for reforestation of the critical water catchment areas, as well as specific areas identified by the Kalinago Council as well as the Division of Forestry in need of reforestation to prevent land slippage as well as erosion. Also, for on the output three of the project, what we intend to do is to design an indigenous gender sensitive tourism strategy as well as a Kalinago brand. And through this experience, we're hoping that we're able to design training modules to support and to enhance capacities in areas linked to tourism attraction, tourism management, service orientation, as well as securing a gender balance of women's participation in the development of this entire strategy and brand for the Kalinago territory. The final output of the project, which speaks to institutional strengthening of the Kalinago Council, we anticipate that the Kalinago Council will be placed in collaboration with various important indigenous groupings regionally as well as internationally through participation in forums as well as conferences. And we also intend to update the Kalinago Council planning documents as well as to assist with the digitization of the Kalinago archives. And we realize the importance, especially of output four, considering the COVID-19 pandemic and the importance of using the digital space as we're utilizing currently. The Kalinago Council is well placed to be supported by the project by providing them with various equipment, etc., to assist them in participating in these meetings and conferences and being able to share the experience of the Kalinago people, as well as to underscore and to provide some information on the history of the Kalinago peoples of Dominica. As it relates to the synergies with the GEF-SGP project, I am very cognizant of the time that has been allocated for this presentation. So I will focus on output one of the project and the synergies that we have realized with the GEF-SGP project, and that relates to the support to strengthening agricultural practices. Both projects have realized the importance of looking at value chain systems of the root crop, and more specifically, the SSLR project focuses on cassava root crop on the farming side, but with more emphasis on increasing manufacturing of cassava byproducts and also by establishing markets to boost the financial earnings along the value chain of the cassava root crop. So the Guidon project, in essence, looks at providing climatic data in order to increase the yield. But we also have to think about what happens when there are increased quantities of the cassava root crop. And the SSLR project, in essence, is providing machinery to the processing facilities of the Kalinago territory. One, to help to reduce labor, or to make the process of manufacturing the cassava root crop less labor intensive, and also to increase manufacturing and production of cassava. Um, Secondly, and to add to this point, I would have listened to the presentation of the ICA representative, Mr. Kopel, on Tuesday, as it relates to resilience building and the multidimensional aspects of resilience. And the cassava root crop in itself relates not only to the increasing of the quantity of the root crop, but we also need to look at the various byproducts which can be derived from the cassava root crop. And establishing markets, identifying first and establishing market potentials for this root crop. So, in essence, the project, relates to helping the farmers increase their yield, as well as looking at market opportunities for various root crops. But the SSLR project focuses exclusively on the cassava root crop. So at present, so much more is being done with cassava, such as many culinary delights, such as cassava burgers and cassava tacos. So just establishing a specific market or a niche for these items will essentially increase the livelihoods and earning potential of the Kalinago community. So to conclude, the SSLR project and the Guidon projects are working together not only to avoid duplication of activities, but also to increase the potential of our varying project activities. And definitely, as we have started and we will continue to do as we go along, is work very closely with each other in order to increase the livelihood potential of individuals within the Kalinago territory space. So over to you, Dion, and thanks for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Macpherson, for this very comprehensive overview of the SSLR project ongoing in the Kalinago territory, and really telling us about the equitable access that is being created to social services and economic opportunities in agriculture, as you mentioned, in manufacturing and the securing of markets for products such as cassava, which sounds very interesting, and I'm sure much appreciated by the farmers of the Kalinago territory, and the general strengthening of capacity in the Kalinago territory. Thank you so much for your presentation. At this point, we move on to the presentation from Ms. Shanna Prevost. She's a development professional with over 15 years of project management experience on development projects, with an emphasis on agriculture and agribusiness, disaster recovery, disaster risk management, climate change, and gender. She has worked with the UNDP on various projects since 2017 and is currently the national focal point for the Enabling Gender Responsive Disaster Recovery, Climate and Environment Resilience in the Caribbean EnGenDER project. Ms. Prevost, good evening and welcome.
Hi, thank you very much, Dion. Good evening, colleagues and fellow viewers. And to Sawana, thank you again for this opportunity. So I'm here to discuss or talk about EnGenDER, enabling gender responsive disaster recovery, climate and environment resilience in the Caribbean. It is a regional project. There are about 9 countries that are participating. Dominica is just one of them. And the goal of the project is to support improved climate resilience for women, girls, and key vulnerable populations and future generations in the Caribbean. The duration really started in March 2019, but in Dominica it started in 2020, just as COVID hit. The funding or the donors are the government of Canada and the UK government. And we work very closely with the Ministry of Youth Development and Empowerment, Youth at Risk, Gender Affairs, Senior Security, and Dominicans with Disabilities. We also work with the Ministry of Environment, Rural Modernization, and Kalinago Upliftment. So I'll just go over briefly the activities or our focus in 2020 and 2021. As I said, the project started just when COVID had hit and just taken the world by surprise. So I think EnGenDER recognized the need to support governments in terms of their response to COVID-19. So the focus for 2020 was on four things: gender-based violence, awareness in terms of gender-based violence, since that tends to increase in times of crisis, shelter and support for survivors of gender-based violence, self-empowerment for women, and also a one-time cash grant to the most vulnerable populations. So the government identified activities that they wanted to do in those categories, and they were fully responsible for implementation. We work very closely with the Bureau of Gender Affairs. In terms of awareness raising, there were radio programs on gender-based violence, and also gender-based violence sensitivity training for community leaders and police officers. In terms of shelter and care packages, there was safe housing for survivors of abuse for about 4 months, as well as care packages, hygiene and food care packages. Empowerment, there was a 2-day entrepreneurial workshop for women. And in terms of the cash grant, approximately 150 persons, well, we work closely with the Ministry of Youth Development for that. 150 persons benefited from just one-time cash grants for persons including but not limited to female-headed households, persons in low-income jobs, persons who lost their livelihoods, the elderly, and people living with disabilities. So that was the focus for 2020. 2021 was more of a technical component. So it entailed data collection, an approach to gender mainstreaming of the NDCs, a gender-responsive budgeted sectoral adaptation plans and strategy, and also leveraging climate financing. So, and in terms of leveraging climate financing, we work with the government to identify a project that they already had that could benefit from, some more funding. And the focus was on the Kalinago community. They focused on the Kalinago community. So currently, there will be we're going to undertake a livelihoods assessment in the Kalinago community, and based on that assessment, we will be doing some training. Well, in 2022. Based on the results of that assessment. So those are basically the four main technical areas that we're looking at in 2021. You should note that the key sectors that we are looking at were agriculture and fisheries, health, social protection, resilient infrastructure and housing, and employment. So given the budget, those were the four general areas that the project is looking at, and these were chosen by the government. And in terms of synergies, well, gender is a strong cross-cutting theme in all sectors and all the projects to ensure inclusion of and benefit to women, elderly, youth, and other vulnerable groups. Agriculture, as I said before, agriculture was one of the sectors that was a priority sector for the government. So in everything we did, there was a focus in terms of data collection or the GRB SASAPs, there was a focus on agriculture as well. And in EnGenDER, we liaised significant or heavily with the GEF project, and as well as the SSLR project and GEF. Synergies are a must in terms of what we do. All my colleagues and I, we work with the same stakeholders. We work with the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Blue and Green Economy, the Bureau of Gender Affairs, etc. So to avoid activity, stakeholder fatigue and activity duplication, we had to find synergies. We also work together to find solutions to problems and fill gaps. So where one project maybe couldn't address an issue, let's say the Guide Down project. An example is buying IT equipment. Under EnGenDER, we bought a few. Guide Down would contribute a bit, and the SSLR project would contribute some more. So this was in terms of IT equipment for the Kalinago community, recognizing that communication is a challenge in that community. So we had no choice but to work together and find solutions to fill gaps. There's significant local expertise in the other projects. For example, Ezra Blondell is a gender analysis. In EnGenDER, we relied heavily on her expertise, her local and international gender expertise. Agnes works with NGOs. Sawana has a background in disaster risk management, and Nickez in natural resource management. So all of the projects are interrelated, and synergies are a must and a given. So that is it for me. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ms. Prevost, and we do note the focus of your project on women and girls and other key vulnerable groups to assist them in areas such as agriculture, fisheries, health, and social protection, and the gender balance that you're seeking to create to ensure benefit for women, for the elderly, and other such vulnerable groups. And certainly, from the three presentations, we have taken note of the synergies that you spoke of. Your stakeholders seem to be common across the three areas, and this common focus on the vulnerable groups in our communities. Thank you so much for bringing us up to date with the projects ongoing at the Dominica Project Office. Under the Guide project, opportunities have been presented, created for farmers to improve and increase their output. In particular, women farmers have received the training and support. But the question is, how do we continue these gains and ensure the sustainability of these interventions? To help us with this, we have with us Dr. Almario Casimir. He's the Acting Technical Officer, Extension Service in the Ministry of Blue and Green Economy, Agriculture, and National Food Security. Dr. Casimir, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, and good evening to your viewers, and good evening to the guests, and good evening to my colleagues. For us in the Ministry of Blue and Green Economy, all these activities are very wonderfully complementary to the overall objective of building a climate resilient Dominica. The Strengthening Disaster Management Capacity project, the Guide Down project, is particularly dear to me as it has actually introduced the social dimension and the capacity building dimension through the PICSA model, which is the Participatory Integrated Climate Smart Agriculture model, which focuses a lot on evidence-based decision-making processes through the use of metadata. So the project has been implemented throughout 3 parishes, which encompasses 4 agricultural regions. Gender equality has been one of the underlying themes, where we have seen significant participation from our women farmers as well as from our male farmers. But at the end of the exercise there, we have seen the farmers really and truly understanding the importance of data and the use of informed data to make critical decisions as it relates to agriculture. Dominica, based on its geographic positions, the young youthfulness of the island, it is very vulnerable, particularly with regards to agricultural production. The topography of the island lends itself to somewhat of a hillside farming technology, and as such, soil conservation is very, very and extremely important to us. Unfortunately for us, we are extremely vulnerable to the ravages of the northeastern trade winds every hurricane season, and as such, the ravages of Hurricane Maria 2017 spelled an era where we would actually proclaim to the world that we wanted to become the first climate resilient island of the globe. And as such, the National Resilient Development Strategy, as developed by the Climate Resilient Executing Agency of Dominica, in partnership with the Ministry of Economic Planning and in partnership with a number of other ministerial organizations, is definitely a blueprint which all of these projects, as discussed tonight here, encapsulates. Because the National Resilient Development Strategy which is basically the guiding blueprint for the recovery process, has three strong pillars, namely climate resilient systems, prudent disaster risk management systems, and effective disaster response and recovery systems. And as such, the GUIDEM project through the PIXA model really and truly attempted to the highest degree to encapsulate and to incorporate these elements. So the Met Office, the Office of Disaster Management, CDER, were some of the institutions who partnered in terms of making that a reality, i.e. historical data in terms of our Met data and how farmers could effectively utilize these information data sets in terms of crop planning and forecasting. Nonetheless, all this again is really and truly the hallmark of what the government of Dominica has articulated through the climate resilient and recovery plan, which has three strong pillars, namely the provision of strong communities, climate resilient systems, and effective disaster risk response and recovery plans. This CCRP is further expanded into 6 key result areas, namely robust economies, well-planned and durable infrastructure, enhanced and collective consciousness, strengthened institutional systems, protected and sustainably leveraged natural and other unique assets. And again, for us in Dominica, the land is one of our most pristine assets, and as such, agriculture practice on hillsides has to be protected. So all this wonderful work spoken about through the GEF Sustainable Small Grants Program, the SSLR project, the GUIDEM project, the EnGenDER project, really and truly brings together all these strategies and elements which makes us going forward to be the most resilient island on the globe. We have 20 climate resilient targets to be achieved by 2030, among them some of them very critical with regards to the critical government emergency services, access to air and seaports, road network systems, etc. At the end of that, 10 are critically high impact climate resilient initiatives to include enhanced social safety network initiatives, community emergency readiness initiatives, resilient housing schemes, the CUDMES system of Dominica, which is really and truly a health program, and resilient dynamic Dominica physical planning to include land utilization for agriculture. So at the end of the exercise, we see all this work in addition to other donor and hemispheric organizations, international agencies, really and truly bringing these elements together in what will become a resilient Dominica. So at the end of the day, we partner with these donor agencies in actually making it a reality. The Ministry of Blue and Green Economy is really and truly a focal point for the implementation of a number of these projects, due to the fact that a number of these projects have an agricultural focus on it. Obviously, we are an agrarian society with other productive sectors coming in to include tourism. But at the end of the day, where agriculture is concerned in terms of livelihoods, these projects really and truly bring it together in terms of addressing the key issues, sustainable systems, improving livelihoods, and protecting the environment. So with that said, Dion, I would like to say thanks. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Dr. Casimir. We are encouraged that you feel, from the perspective of the Ministry of Agriculture, that the projects being undertaken at the UNDP Dominica office will help to further Dominica's resilience agenda, help us to strengthen systems and reach our climate resilience targets while we improve livelihoods and protect our environment. So thank you so much for your presentation this evening. We have spent the past week looking at the gains under the GUIDEM project, and now we're being exposed a little bit more to the work being done under the other projects at the Dominica office. But what lies ahead for the Dominica Project Office and its continuing work to assist our farmers or vulnerable groups to protect their livelihoods? For this, we have with us Ms. Sawana Fabien, who is the project coordinator at UNDP. Sawana currently leads the Strengthening Disaster Management Capacity of Women project. Prior to that, she was the Disaster Risk Management Specialist and Program Manager at Israel, where she worked on the Safe School Program Initiative. She is also the CEO of LSJ Solutions Consultancy Limited, consultancy that works in the fields of research, education, disaster risk reduction, safety assessments, and emergency response. Prior to this, Sawana worked as a social welfare officer at the Ministry of Social Services. She holds a master's degree in disaster management from the University of Auckland. Sawana, good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Dion. Good evening to you, and good evening to everyone who has joined us live. I just want to say a special shout out to our extension officers and our beneficiaries, and also my project team who is here, who has worked so very hard to support the planning and implementation of this week of activities. It thrills me really to share this space, this virtual space, with my colleagues within the UNDP Dominica project office, and with Dr. Casimir, who is our focal point on the project in the Ministry of Blue and Green Economy, Agriculture, and National Food Security. I'm happy that each of them were able to share and reinforce some of the synergies and interrelations that our projects have in common. And I think it's really commendable to speak to the efficient collaboration that exists among the project coordinators within the Dominica project office. The Guyana project throughout the week of activities promised to showcase its achievement through the voice of our stakeholders and beneficiaries. The key achievements on this project were highlighted through its three main outputs. In output one, you would have seen the tremendous work in national expansion of early warning systems, the implementation of PICSA for the wet season, through which Miss Erica Biscom was able to share the impacts that PICSA training had on her ability to apply mitigation and adaptation approaches on her farm. In output two, we delved further into livelihood resilience, where we zeroed in on the project's three-prong approach on access to finance resources by our female farmers. This week alone, we delivered to 25 men and women in the Southeast personal protective equipment. And this week also, we received 36 applications for low-value grants up to $10,000 to support women groups and cooperatives. In my opening remarks, I alluded that output 3, which pertains to knowledge management, had been underdeveloped. However, through the week of activities, we caught a glimpse through the voices of our farmers like Joan Hilaire and Erica Biscom as they shared in brave and convincing ways their respective farming practices. They highlighted the learning and influence that the capacity building component of the project had on their livelihoods. In this project's final year, the following are our major deliverables across the three outputs. Output 1, Community Emergency Community Emergency Telecommunication Toolkits, example UHF radios and emergency megaphones, will be provided in all of the project's target communities. Education materials for early childhood education on disaster risk reduction, training for PTAs on supporting their children to understand disaster risk reduction, the installation of EWS equipment in 4 parishes, the training of government technical officers to operationalize and maintain these equipments, the production of hazard risk maps that links to the early warning system server, and the conducting of public awareness and education on early warning systems. Furthermore, the continuation of the implementation of the highly recognized participatory integrative climate smart agriculture PICSAR training. In output 2, we're going to set up a revolving fund that steps towards, we set up a revolving fund and steps towards mainstreaming. The unique features of this finance facility, the revolving fund, is that it comes with parametric insurance, business training, personal development, and enhanced gender responsive customer service for implementing financial institutions. This finance facilities establishes certificates of deposits with good interest yielding rates that could be used as fallback position in the event of a disaster. Support to agro-processors, bespoke equipments, market events, and branding. Climate smart agricultural training. This training will target some of our women farmers and groups who have missed out on the Pixar trainings as mentioned in Output 1. Some training topics will be and focus on farm energy, farm business development, weather data to improve productivity, crop and livestock management, pest and disease management, soil and land management. With FAO and the Ministry of Blue and Green Economy, Agriculture and National Food Security, the project will revise and validate the draft Agriculture Disaster Risk Management Strategy. The project will also support the government with implementing short-term community level priority actions and mainstream gender inclusive disaster risk management best practices. In output 3, the final output, we'll set up four female-led networks to share knowledge on best agricultural practices within the country and with Guyana. Farming champions will be supported to take leadership roles within these networks. Identifying and nurturing disaster risk reduction, gender, and agro-processing champions. Strengthening existing partnerships with stakeholders is critical to the achievement of 2022 targets. Our focus on mainstreaming will require deepening the engagement with senior leadership, policymakers, and other key stakeholders. We thank all those who have supported the project in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and who will support our project in 2022. Over to you, Dion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sawana. And with the success that we've already realized under the various projects at the UNDP Dominica Project Office, we're quite confident that the outcomes you've identified will come to fruition, and we certainly look forward to it and pledge our support. Thank you. On Monday, we introduced you to our champion farmers, and we asked you to help us to select the winners in each district. And you have done so. You have got online on Facebook and made your vote. You cast your vote, and we've selected our winners. Tonight, we are ready to announce our farming champions. But before we do so, we'd like to remind you of the nominees in the competition. And then, of course, we will announce our winners. In the East District, we had Mr. Anthony Lucien of Crayfish River, Mr. Vincent Elize of Concord, Miss Regina Joseph of St. Cyr, Mr. Adrian Banis of Castlebruce. In the Southeast, Albertha Sorrento of Dalis, Dalton Antwine, also of Dalis, Joan Lawrence, Jake Matthew of Montjon, Cheyenne Alexander of Bells from the Central District, Joanna Edmond of the Layou Valley, Michael Warrington of Warner, Clement Ferrara of the Layou Valley, Julietta Richards of Cochrane, Ronaldson Piper of Cochrane, and Anne-Marie Germain Scarrett of Corona. From the South, Erica Biscombe of Soufrière, Joachim Paquette of Grand Bay, Magdalena Raphael of Bellevue-Chopin, Ronnie Bellot, Cynthia Bedminster of Mont Prosper, Mabel Charles of Mont Prosper, Julian Theophile of Girardel, Osmond Lavenier of Grand Bay. And these were the champion farmers in the competition. Tonight we will select 8, or rather announce the 8 winners who have been selected by you, the Dominican public, as our ultimate 8 champion winners. And just a note that our winners, each of them will receive $500 worth of goods of their own selection as part of their winning packages, courtesy the United Nations Development Program Dominica Project Office. We're moving on now to the winners of the Farming Champions. In the South District, our first winner is Mabel Charles of Mont Prosper. Mabel is a agro-processor working on 1.5 acres. She grows carrots, cabbage, sweet peppers, seasoning peppers, turnips, beetroot, lettuce, and tomatoes. And she produces green seasoning from parsley, celery, thyme, and sells to Astafans, Bolos, Mobile, and HHV, which she has told the UNDP that her greatest challenge is with pests, weather variability, and reliable markets. But of course, I'm sure she has gotten assistance to take on those challenges. Our second winner in the South is Ronnie Bellot, who farms on 5 plots. He rears goats, sheep, cows, pigs, broilers, rabbits. He grows tomatoes, beetroot, corn, watermelon, lettuce, cabbage, and plantain. He sells to Whitchurch and Fresh Market, and he has issues and challenges with weather variability and reliable markets. So our 2 winners in the South, Mabel Charles and Ronnie Bellot. In the Central District, our first winner, Anne-Marie Germain Scarrett. She's a farmer of Corona, and she works on 4 acres with poultry, avocados, bananas, beetroot, lettuce, Christophine, dashing, and grapefruit. She sells to Fresh Market, Best Price, Miniers, and SMAT supermarkets. She says her challenge is transportation to the farmer. Congratulations to Anne-Marie Germain Scarrett. The second winner from the Central District is Michael Warrington. He farms in Warner on 3 acres. He rears rabbits, as you can see, sweet potatoes he grows, white Irish potatoes, vegetables, citrus, and avocado. He's actively involved in the farming group in Warner and has created a vibrant customer network. In the East, Regina Joseph of St. Cyr is a farmer working on 4 acres. She grows yams, cocoa, turmeric, ginger, cassava, Tanya, dashing, and traditional healing herbs. Significantly, Ms. Joseph is also the recipient of the Meritorious Service Award just awarded on November 3rd for her contribution to agriculture. The second winner in the East is Adrian Bannis of Castlehurst. He's an agro-processor farming on 3.6 acres. He grows passion fruit, plantain, banana, pineapple, citrus, cocoa, and breadfruit. He produces breadfruit and plantain chips and wines from local fruit. Quite the enterprising farmer here, Mr. Adrian Bannis, our second winner in the East. And in the Southeast, first, Alberta Sorrento. She's a Delicis agro-processor of cocoa and toloma. She also plants vegetables and healing herbs. Our congratulations to Alberta Sorrento. And the second winner from the Southeast, from Dalis, Dalton Antoine, who farms on 15 acres of land. He rears cattle, sheep, goats, and he grows plantain and toloma. He sells large quantities of raw produce to hucksters, and he's also the main caretaker for his elderly relatives, including his aunt. So congratulations to all our winners, and we look forward to their continuing success in the agriculture sector here in Dominica. At this point, we are winding down our activity, and I now have the honor, because it is an honor, to recognize and acknowledge those who have assisted us and assisted the UNDP Dominica office to make a success not only of this week of activities, but also the work that they've been doing in general to advance agriculture and other areas in Dominica to ensure gender balance in their projects and programs at the UNDP office. So first, we would like to acknowledge the contribution of the government of Japan, which has provided funding for the GEF-SGP project. Our government partners, the Ministry of Blue and Green Economy, Agriculture and National Food Security, the Division of Agriculture, the East, Southeast, South, and Central Agriculture Extension regions, the Livestock Unit, the Ministry of National Security and Home Affairs, the Dominica Met Service, and the Office of Disaster Management, the Ministry of Youth Development and Empowerment, the Bureau of Gender Affairs, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, specifically Lands and Service Department, and the Climate Resilience Execution Agency for Dominica, CREED. Our implementing partners, the Inter-American Institute of Cooperation in Agriculture, ICA, Caribbean Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology, the University of Reading, and the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO. Quite a few panel discussions were held this week, and we would like to thank those who facilitated and participated, including Mr. Hugo Blanco, the Deputy Resident Representative of the UNDP Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, Mr. Yasuhiko Kamada, Consular Embassy of Japan for the Commonwealth of Dominica, the Honorable Fidel Grant, the Minister of the Blue and Green Economy, Agriculture and National Food Security, as well as Ms. Sawana Fabien, the Project Coordinator for the UNDP Dominica Project Office, Ms. Natasha Eloy Liba, Development Consultant, and her panelists, Mr. Kent Kopel, the Technical Specialist in the ICA Delegation in Dominica, Nikelia Gregoire Karai, Technical Specialist in Water and Soil, Monica Rogers Fletcher, Microfinance Consultant, Ambassador Francine Barron, the CEO of CREED, and Joan Hillary, a farmer and agro-processor. We thank Dr. Kimon Joseph, the head of the UE Open Campus in Dominica, for moderating a panel discussion on gender with panelists Melissa Morgan, the Acting Director of Gender Affairs, Ezra Blondell, Gender Analyst at the UNDP, Mrs. Josephine Dublin Prince, the Executive Director of the Dominica Council of Women, Adisa Trotter, an Agriculture Officer in the Ministry of Agriculture, and technical support provided by Naomi Etienne, Project Associate with the UNDP Dominica Project Office. We also thank our moderator, Idona John Baptist, head of the Carrier FM News Department, for helping us with the panel discussion on early warning systems with her panelists, Sawana Fabien, Marshall Alexander, the Senior Met Officer, Dr. Casimir, who we just heard from earlier with the Ministry of Agriculture, and Vivian Eugene, Land Surveyor, Lands and Service Division. And the Pixar panel discussion, thank you to Marlon Clark, who moderated with his panels, Graham Clarkson, Senior Research Fellow at the University of Reading, Annie Joseph, Met Officer, Asha Burton, Agriculture Officer, Erica Biscom, a farmer and agro-processor, and Adriana Trutman for the Chief Applied Meteorology and Hydrology. We thank for this ceremony we've just had our participants, Ms. Fabien again, Agnes Esprit, the National Coordinator of the GEF Small Grants Project, Ms. Shanna Prevost, the National EnGenDER Project Assistance, Nickez Pherson, Project Coordinator, SSLR, and Dr. Almario Casimir of the Ministry of Blue and Green Economy. And of course, we must thank our business collaborators, including D-Supplies, DPEX, Do It Center, J. Astafans, E.H. Charles, P.H. Williams, J.'s Campbell's. Our media partner, The Chronicle, MO News, Dominica News Online, DBS Radio, Kyra FM, Vibes Radio, UWTV, thank you so much, Kimani Casimir, Digicel, and Flo. Our video and jingles production, Clint Henderson, Marinus Stitt, Karen Daru, Fadina Frampton, Arkham by J.L. Joseph, 365 MMP, and Paz Quayall production. And a big thanks to the UNDP Dominica Project Office team members, UNDP Barbados, and Eastern Caribbean team members. I'm sure you'll agree with me that it's extremely important that we give thanks. Although this may have seemed extensive, it's important that we acknowledge those who contributed. So this takes us to the end of this activity. We thank everyone for joining us and for all the support that you've provided during the past week. After all, above all, we look forward to the long-term positive impact of this project and all the work that the UNDP Dominica office will continue to do to support our development efforts here in Dominica. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. To have yourselves a wonderful Friday evening and a great weekend. Good evening.